Inside here, I have a new saxophone, the likes of which you have never seen before. I give to you the new Keilwerth 100th Anniversary SX90R. So before I really get into the nuts and bolts of this new saxophone from Keilwerth, I just want to point out the sort of feelings and emotions I have as I hold this saxophone, because all of us here at Sax have just been bowled over by this saxophone. The moment we opened up the case and saw this thing sitting there, it kind of looks like no other new saxophone really in terms of the impression that it makes on you. It is quite an outstanding statement piece of a saxophone. We've got obviously the incredible visuals of this piece here, which I'll just get into in a sec. But I just need to explain to you, the feeling that it has, that it translates onto the player as you hold this instrument. Perhaps it doesn't always come across in the photography and the internet pieces that you may see, but when you actually physically hold this saxophone yourself, you really are quite wowed by what you see. So the basic facts, let's go through it. So this is a limited edition, as I say, 100 models are being made altogether for Alto and Tenor. This is based on the Shadow design, so it's the Shadow SX90R. And the principal feature of the Shadow is that it's made from a nickel-silver base metal. So that's not a plating, that is the base metal, and this is no different. So it's a nickel-silver base metal, and in fact, if you just look at the internals on the bell here, you can see what the nickel-silver actually looks like, but they have completed the saxophone in this rather beautiful sand-blasted finish, which looks really subtle and very sophisticated in my view. So it's based on the nickel silver of the Shadow, but in addition, we've got some really special touches that Keilwerth have added, the most notable of which is this sort of angel wing type design, which is like a nod to their Tone King model of the 1950s. It just looks absolutely fabulous. In terms of, again, the aesthetics of it, we've got black nickel plating here, which they've never done before, Keilwerth, on their SX90R models. They certainly use the black nickel plating for the finish of the main body, but not on the keywork and mechanism like they have done here. A few other notable features. We've got this rather special looking neck here. This is the Icon design, and it's actually a completely new design of neck. And this instrument actually comes with two necks. So I'm showing it with the special offering of this Icon neck. The other one, which is to my left here, is the standard neck that you would get with a regular SX90R. Some other special features as well that I must point out. So we have some lovely ebony finger touches here. They look absolutely smashing from close up. And it's not just the finger touches on the front, but on the rear. We have an ebony left-hand thumb button, which just looks beautiful and feels beautiful as well. So these are the key features here. So there's a lot to get into. So I'll talk about some of this in a bit more detail in a moment. But for the time being, let's check it out and see how it sounds. Well, I have to admit it, I just love the sound of this sax, and I love playing on this sax. It's such a great experience. So let's just go through what we've got here sound-wise, because largely we're getting the sound characteristics of the Shadow, the SX90R Shadow. That's what it is. But there are differences between the Shadow and this saxophone. I A-B'd them before doing this video, and I couldn't believe the difference that this icon neck made. So they've done some special things here, Keilwerth, to produce this modified neck and give this overall sound scope this extra depth and sophistication. You really can notice it because it comes with this second neck, and this is the standard SX90R neck, which sounds wonderful in itself, but you really do notice the difference as you A-B this neck to this one. So if you're going to look at this instrument, I thoroughly recommend that you try both the necks, but I would put a bet on it that this would be the one that you may stick with because it just has this extra body and depth, if that's even possible, beyond the standard Shadow sound, which is just wonderful in itself. Also, just a general thing on SX90Rs in terms of their sort of internal bore spec, which differentiates them from the standard sort of Selmer, Yanagisawa type design. There is a bigger bore inside the Keilwerth than those saxophones just mentioned. If you actually measure this point here at the tenon point, it's actually about 1 millimeter wider than we get on the French and Japanese designs. And that wider bore does have an impact on the way it responds. It feels like it's a little bit more resistant, that you have to fill it with air. But when you do fill it with air, you really get the reward for doing that because it just sounds so full, as I say. Other things to point out in terms of the ergonomic side of things. I wouldn't necessarily recommend the saxophone for those of you who have smaller hands because it does feel like there's a little bit more of a stretch going on, particularly really with the right hand, just around this area. I'm not saying it's uncomfortable at all. It's actually fine for me. I would just say if you had particularly small hands, you might find that just a little bit more of a stretch, and that is the case with all Keilwerth saxophones. Talking of the ergonomics, let's just home in again on these ebony buttons. I mentioned it at the outset. Not only are they beautiful to look at, but they also feel really lovely and tactile as well. They do have these sort of edges, so there's a kind of concave nature to them. And for me, if you actually play it with flat fingers, you kind of feel the edges there, which you might enjoy or you might find it slightly irritating, depending on your point of view. But when you just curve the fingers a little bit more, then they slot nicely sort of into the dishes, as it were. So that's just one thing I picked up on when I first played the instrument. Other things of note with the Keilwerth saxophones in general, they are famous for this lifting G-sharp mechanism, which is brilliant because it entirely stops your G-sharp from sticking. So love that. It also has rolled tone holes throughout. Again, Keilwerth saxophones are famous for having the rolled tone holes. But let's just focus a little again on this spectacular looking, as we call it, the angel wings design here. You may want to know that you can actually remove this, should you want to do that. I mean, blasphemy, right? Because it just looks fabulous. I can't see why you would want to remove it, but should you want to, you can. There's a few little grub screws here, here, and here, and then you will just make it look like a regular, boring saxophone, I suppose. And another thing to point out, which is fabulous about the entirety of the package, is this beautiful leather case that it comes with. You can tell it's leather because it smells like leather. And, you know, it's hefty, chunky. Some people may say it weighs a little bit too much by the time you put your saxophone in it, but it is of pure quality. I can certainly tell you that. So the whole out, and there's some nice gubbins in here, by the way. I'm not going to go into it right now, but you know, you can see the quality of the case, you can see the quality of the saxophone. You can only imagine that the stuff in here is of quality too, and it is. So in general, Myself and all the guys here at Sax are hugely impressed with this. But I should point out, as I did earlier, that it is very limited. There are only 100 of these altogether for alto and tenor combined. I believe Europe has only 14 altogether, and we're lucky to get perhaps just a few more here at Sax than some other retailers. So for that, we are very grateful. But these saxophones are not going to hang around very long. But it's also just nice to see an anniversary model coming from Keilwerth, because it's a brand that's not mentioned so much these days for some reason, considering they produce such amazing saxophones and have such a rich saxophone legacy. I suppose there are 100 pieces to recognise the 100 years. I've just noticed it. It says 100 on there, and it made me have that thought. So that's fair enough, but as I say, it's a limited commodity, which is a shame. But if you really want to get your hands on one of these, you have to act now. And generally speaking, I just think the whole thing is fantastic, because I've always loved the sound of the SX90R Shadow, but not only is it a looker of a sax, and I've gone on about the looks for the last 10 minutes, but it actually plays really great as well. I believe it's a proper player's saxophone. It really does sound great, and with this new icon neck, it just gives it an extra dimension, which is really attractive to me, and I'm sure many of you. So that's it from me. I've really enjoyed showing this instrument to you. If you want to come and see it for yourself, please come on down to our store, or if not, order online, because these things are not going to be hanging around for very long.